Hello everyone, how you going? And welcome to How the Underground Railroad Worked. Now this is a topic that I was introduced from watching Canadian Heritage Minutes, and they were great for what they were, but now I just want to expand a little bit.
To properly understand how the Underground Railroad worked, we first have to know what caused it, and that is slavery. Slavery's history spans many cultures, nationalities, and religions from ancient times and unfortunately still today. From all the enslavement periods throughout history, perhaps one is the most noticeable: the 246 years of slavery in the USA. The starting point of slavery in America was in 1619 when 20 enslaved Americans were brought to the British colony of Virginia. Over the following decades, hundreds of thousands of people were sold or kidnapped from Africa and shipped to 13 colonies, then forced into slavery.
Wait, whoa, that is some serious statistics. But thinking about it now, even though it is obviously a very worldwide known thing that these kind of events happened, like you said, all throughout history and then also in more recent times, I actually feel as though I have very limited knowledge surrounding the entire thing. I mean, I guess it's North America we're talking about, and I guess I would have learned through the Australian school system more about what has happened locally, and so hopefully I'm not missing too much context and information that I'm going to need to understand the video. I can only hope not, but otherwise I'll do my best.
The starting point of slavery in America was in 1619 when 20 enslaved Americans were brought to the British colony of Virginia. Over the following decades, hundreds of thousands of people were sold or kidnapped from Africa and shipped to 13 colonies, then forced into slavery. After the American Revolutionary War, some northern states abolished slavery, while the southern states had an economy built on it because the South had a perfect climate and available land to grow crops like rice, sugarcane, tobacco, and cotton.
And for me at least, that is something that I too often forget. Even though there was a massive, very well-known war between the North and the South, I just often forget that there was such a divide between, okay, obviously the South, like you said, has this economy, and they've built it up through growing various products, but at the expense of many, I guess hundreds of thousands of people. But where I start to get mixed up and actually too often forget is the fact that it wasn't a country v country thing. It was actually an internal dispute. It wasn't Canada going to war against the USA because they disagreed with the things going on. It was actually before all of that, before the country was a country, and it just had states v states and I guess people v people.
Until 1850, the balance was kept between the free states and the slave states. But after half of the 19th century, the situation tilted the balance in the favor of the Union because these 5 states joined the US. But for the purpose of this video, we are going to look at what an enslaved African American's life was like in the year of 1850, when the balance was still maintained. Back then, he didn't have many choices in life. He could remain on his owner's plantation, work 6 days a week from sunrise to sunset, regarding himself to a life of harsh and painful labor, barbaric physical punishment, and possibly a broken family as he watched his loved ones be sold away. Not all enslaved people had the same life, but this is what he might expect if he remained in bondage. Or he could try and run away, but escaping was anything but easy.
And look, the fact is that virtually everyone would have heard about these things, seen about these things in movies and literature and drawings and illustrations, but just to hear someone talking about it in such a, not a candid way, such an open way like this, in a documentary style, it just breaks your heart. Because like he said, it wasn't just the sunrise to sunset shifts with torturous, painful and laborious tasks all day, every day, 6, 7 days a week, 8 days a week, for goodness sake. No, it was also the fact that you lost your family, you lost your friends, you lost your entire community along the way or immediately. And for the first wave of hundreds of thousands of people that were brought over, it would have been a massive cultural thing, but then after a while it became a generational thing as well, which I don't even know if you can say which one's worse. And like he said, for so many people it was anything but easy, but it was more so just deemed completely hopeless to even attempt to escape. It just wasn't worth it, but it wasn't worth it either way. And that was showcased in one of the most recent Heritage Minutes to be uploaded to YouTube. She just longed for a freedom to be respected for all these different things, and it just didn't end well at all when she tried to escape.
So, due to hard labor and punishments, an enslaved individual decides to leave. The closer he is to the border between the free states and the slave states, the easier it is. This is why from the estimated 100,000 people who escaped through the Underground Railroad, many of them were from the border states, because the journey was much shorter and safer, and it was thought once they arrived north, they were free. On the other hand, African Americans from the South had way longer journeys until the North, and probably many of them didn't even know the free states existed. As an enslaved individual, knowing how to read or write was a crime. So without any maps, not knowing where to head, escaping alone was very difficult. That being said, this is where the Underground Railroad comes into the story.
Honestly, I don't know if it's because, like I said, I don't know mounds about the entire situation, but just to hear him saying these things, it just gets your skin crawling, or at least it gets my skin crawling. Like the fact that he said, it was illegal to be able to read and write. Like if you were to think about that today, you have workers, but you don't want them to be competent or any more competent than you need. I guess in the same way that they wouldn't want to pay for a forklift to have wings wings so it could fly away. Like, it's just so contained. Every part of their lives was so controlled. And so it certainly makes sense that the border states would have had a massive outflux of people in comparison to the southern states, because the country is so massive, and so there was hundreds of kilometers of, I guess, obstacles getting in the way of word of mouth, if nothing else.
As the name says, this route was made of many underground ghost train stations that led to the far north, even Canada, or at least that's what the myth says. In reality, it was neither underground nor a railroad, but a secret network which was not run by a single organization or person. It was run by both black and white people, who tried rescuing individuals to the far north. This system had a well-defined structure, and certain people had certain roles, whose names were coded, so masters and owners of enslaved people wouldn't be aware of this secret route.
Alrighty then, well that has just enlightened me a lot. Obviously I had no idea about all the encryption, and I guess it is a weird name to be calling it the Underground Railroad when it isn't a series of tunnels or rail or anything like that. From the Heritage Minute, I believe that he was lying down in, I guess, a church stall or some piece of furniture, I believe, and that was a question I did have when I was watching their original Heritage Minute, going, hang on a second, is the car driver even aware of this situation, or is he just more like a truck driver that's hooked up to a trailer, doesn't know what's in the back? I mean, in the end it is revealed that he is in on the entire situation, which does make sense. It would make the entire process go much more smoothly, hopefully. However, I think my favorite part about the entire thing is the fact that it was a true network of people just trying to get this job done, you know? It wasn't just one person that had the resources and the money and the facilities to be able to accomplish a task like this, obviously with help, but you know, just they're the head honcho. No, it was a true mixture of people that just went, we cannot be doing this anymore. We're using our brains. We understand that it's not, I don't know, BC times, and we just cannot be living like this anymore, and so we have to try and do everything in our power just to break some sort of a cycle here.
It is believed that the Underground Railroad was created shortly before the beginning of the 19th century by abolitionists, many of whom lived in Pennsylvania. Many abolitionists, or people who were enslaved but escaped on their own, joined the network. One of the most important roles in this system was the agent, who was a person that went to plantations to try and help the enslaved ones escape by telling them to meet at a certain time near the plantation with a conductor, who was a guide. Here, the first issue comes into the equation. What if no agent came? In this case, they had to escape on their own. But remember, they didn't have any maps, and most of them were illiterate. So without some outside help, this was very unlikely.
Yeah, wow, that would have put them in a very sticky situation, because all of a sudden you can't exactly go back because you've already left, but then if you found out, you just, well, nothing's going to go your way. And it does make sense that you're going to want someone like an agent to be able to provide everything you need. Let's say just cartography skills and everything else, and maybe even just the map in general to be able to, okay, I'm going north. But either way, I can only imagine there would have been some very tense nights just waiting and wondering what is going to happen, where is this person, what's going on. I wonder if there was any ever fakes where people knew of the agent, like on the other side, and they double bluffed them or something like that, because surely even though everything was encrypted and there was all this secrecy around the entire thing, surely someone must have put the puzzle together and went, oh, hang on a second, they're all disappearing. And so even though they would have been left with no other option besides spending the rest of their days in the field, honestly, what a decision to make. It would have been such a treacherous one, and I guess some people just went, I cannot risk it.
But at least they had songs, as they were transmitted from generation to generation and contained hints that helped the escapees go north. So they were something like musical maps. Lyrics from Follow the Drinking Gourd are a guide for people who wanted to escape. Wow. And even the title means Follow the North Star. So, if the enslaved is alone, that's kind of the only thing that helps him. He had to leave at night and travel until the sunrise, rest in the day, and then again, when night came, followed the North Star and moss on trees to go north and hope for the best. Although going alone was not the best option, if one wanted to escape from bondage, he had to go on his own, or wait for an agent to come. But he wouldn't know if somebody would ever try and rescue him.
Oh, that's the worst part. You might have heard stories or heard myths or heard these things, but you never know whenever they're going to come up. If they ever turn up, you just won't know. And then, like I said, surely in the back of your mind, you're just going, are they trying to play me? Are they trying to weed us out, trying to figure out who's trying to escape to just even punish us more or something like that? I mean, I love the fact that they were able to put these hints into generational songs, and even just following the moss on trees. That's another great one, because you can see which way the sun is rising and the shade is obviously allowing things to grow or not. I mean, I am now wondering, was there ever situations where they were able to take groups of people, or is that just too obvious? I mean, sure, they would have tried it. I mean, it would certainly be harder to hide it, and so I can understand why you would want to travel on your own in terms of trying to be discreet, but oh man, surely there's some kind of safety in numbers, and you would just feel so lonely. And also, hang on a second, what happened to the agent? Surely they have to go with him. Wasn't that what he was just saying? They need the maps and cartography and all those kind of things to be able to go north, besides having a song. I mean, I guess maybe the agent stays behind, and so they can get one after another another after another, but at the same time, I would just be going, surely you set this up. Can't you offer me a bit more help than just pointing north?
And if somebody came, how could the enslaved individual know if the supposed agent was trustworthy? Alright, now let's imagine that a true agent came. Now what's next? Generally, agents usually pretended to be enslaved to enter plantations and tell the others the date when they would have to escape. The perfect time would have been on a clear night on Saturday, because masters would have to wait until Monday morning to place an announcement in the newspaper that one escaped. The best season to try and escape was late fall or early winter because the longer the nights, the more ground the escapees could cover. Groups couldn't be too big because they could be easily spotted.
Oh, sweet. Okay, so there was actually groups of people. I was just going, that sounds so efficient, but maybe it's just what had to be done to be one at a time. But no, at least it was actually groups of people at a time, which also would have helped protect and retain just that little bit of family they might have been able to hold on to. You know, you don't want to be splitting people up once again. But then clearly, as we saw here, there was so much that went into actually just trying to get the best odds for everyone. You know, you're trying to go on a Saturday, but then maybe you switch it up and you don't go on a Saturday because they might have been expecting it after a while. And yes, it makes sense that you would want the longest nights to be able to extend the amount of distance that you can travel, but let's say you end up learning that, okay, it's going to rain this week or this month, and so it's going to be really wet, you're going to have landslides, and it's going to just slow progress. So if we go earlier or later, maybe that's going to be better even if the days are shorter. Or actually, I guess if the days are longer, that's what's going to work against you if you're traveling at night. But either way, the entire thing just becomes so militarized, just trying to stack the odds so much in your favor, or just as much as possible in your favor, because they're slim to begin with.
After the meeting point and time were set, they had to wait, act normally, and when the night came, leave. At the meeting point, they would find the conductor, where they will change their clothes because back then a group of African American people with dirty clothes would look very suspicious. Then the guide would lead them through the night until the first station, which was 10 to 20 miles away. In case you didn't realize yet, each of the roles involved in the system had coded names that would have normally been used in a railroad system. The cargo, or the escapees, will wait at a station, which is owned by a station master, who is the owner of the safe house until the next conductor will come to move the cargo further north.
That makes so much sense because it does become like a full military operation. You know, people are getting in their minds, okay, we better watch the railroads because it's an underground railroad, people are going to be moving this way. Meanwhile, they're just walking the entire way, but hey, at least they actually made it there while you're too busy looking at the real railroad. I mean, I'm still wondering how all of these people got over the hurdle of trusting these people again, you know? I mean, I guess you're already in a dire straight situation, and so you go, I mean, I guess it can't really get any worse, so let's just go for it. But honestly, if I was put in a box and just transported a couple of 100 kilometers away, completely blind, and at the other end I just open it up and I see the same people that have just been ruining my life for however long, I would just break down, I reckon.
To reduce the risk of infiltration, many people associated with the Underground Railroad knew only their part of the operation and not of the whole scheme. This process was repeated many times until the escapees finally arrived in the Free States, where they could enjoy freedom and never be enslaved again. Wait, what's that? It's the year 1850, and the second Fugitive Slave Act passed? This basically encouraged capturing escapees and sending them back to the South. The penalties were harsher for people who hid fugitives, but it also created controversy. A free African-American black man in the North could be considered an escapee. Therefore, he could get enslaved and be sent to the South.
What? I was about to ask, when did this possibly happen? But we know it was 1850, but how did this happen? It's like I said, you're going back to BC times. Because all of a sudden, you've got all of these people that made the entire journey, and then they just went, nope, coming on back. You just got to travel another 1,000 kilometers back south, please. Or not even please, but just generally you do. That would just be absolutely ridiculous to deal with. I don't know how you mentally deal with that after you've gone through that entire thing. And honestly, I'm sure some people went for it a second time, and I guess some would have been successful, others wouldn't have been. But to just have that taste of freedom for however long and then just be dragged back into the same torturous situation that you were in, I cannot fathom it. And I mean, I guess from their very, very one-sided perspective, it makes sense that they would want to make it more difficult and more discouraged to do it. But honestly, the fact that they were also increasing the punishment for people that were also enabling this entire thing to happen, it's just so painful. Because you're creating this perfect storm where no one can leave because they don't have the ability to read and write and navigate. You're just creating it impossible for anyone else to help because they just can't risk it anymore. And then after all of that, even if they do manage to do both of those things, you can just completely negate all the effects of it because you can just drag them back south. I wonder when this was revoked, because 1850, surely it didn't last long.
A Fugitive Slave Act was previously passed in 1793, but this second one made many escapees go even further north, to Canada, or how it was called by enslaved individuals in the South, Heaven, or the Promised Land. There they could avoid U.S. jurisdiction and slavery wasn't a thing there, although racism still existed. Black
Yeah.
people who were once enslaved formed communities, and men had the right to vote and the right to own property. All
Right.
black people could earn a living, get married, and start a family. With assistance from Canada's government and abolitionist societies in Canada and the United States, building a new life was possible.
And see, that is where Canada finally comes into it. Honestly, when they were talking about the North States, I just kind of had a mixture of Canada and the USA, but I hadn't realized that Canada wasn't even in the picture yet. I mean, to be fair, I can absolutely agree and understand why they would have called it heaven, because my goodness, you've just gone from, let's say, some of the southern states, maybe the borderline states, even now they're just kind of renounced states, and then all of a sudden you travel, I guess, a very long way, but realistically only a short span of your life if you can actually get it done, and you're just all of a sudden able to own land, have a family, be able to vote, all of these things. I mean, like they said, they were male privileges, and so it wasn't a perfect heaven situation, but either way, just the difference going from slavery to owning your own house, for goodness sake.
But for some, this wasn't enough. They wanted to help. Some became conductors and went back to the South to try and free their friends and relatives. One of the most courageous and famous people during these times was Harriet Tubman. Between 1850 and 1860, Tubman made 19 trips from the north to the south, following the Underground Railroad, and set free hundreds of enslaved people.
Made 2 trips a year for a decade and set hundreds of enslaved people free, and still wasn't able to get caught by making all of those trips, like covering thousands and thousands of kilometers. She certainly must have been very, very skilled in the entire organization. I mean, it does go against what they said before in terms of most people didn't know, or everyone didn't know, the entire route. I mean, maybe she did it enough and did every single role, and so she ended up just being able to run the entire organization and be able to make 19 trips in 10 years herself. Either way, it is just so incredible and commendable. Honestly, I don't know if there's a word to really describe it, but just the fact that you go, okay, yeah, it worked all the other times, that doesn't mean it's going to work next time, but I'm going back anyway because it's just what I'm going to do. I mean, of course, the feeling of being able to free these people, your people, would have just been incredible. Just the emotion that would have been locked inside of them when they finally arrived. I can't even imagine it. And so I can understand why you would just want to continue to free more people and just continue to go back, but honestly, it takes a very special type of person to overcome even just a survival instinct of going, no, I just cannot bring myself to do it one more time. Last time was too close, we cut it too fine. And even though they were just focusing on Harriet Tubman, honestly, we need to tip our hat to all of these people because they are just incredible as well.
Slavery was one of the primary causes of the American Civil War, and both the victory of the Union and the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865 ended slavery in the United States forever. And with it, the Underground Railroad became history.
Because it wasn't needed, I can only assume. That's the good part about the entire thing. That's the one time you want a positive thing to be ended, is when it's not needed because the negative side isn't there anymore. But my goodness, that would have been a treacherous 15 years, from 1850 to 1865, after the bill was passed and after all the extra laws and everything were just put in place just to try and, I guess, condemn people from doing such a thing, up until the American Civil War and the entire thing kind of being flipped on its head. I mean, it would have taken time, but at least the first step was there. And look, even though this video clearly focused on what is now the USA, considering that's where it was originating from, that's where the problems was, that's where everyone was migrating away from, Canada was just always there, ready and waiting to accept these people. It was possible. It just gave them hope. It was an incredible resource, if you even want to call it that, to allow these people to have a real life. You know, you've gone from being owned to owning land. Like, the step is just unimaginable if you've been born into that. And of course, this video can only cover so much, and so it's not going to have every little detail, but honestly, it is such an incredible eye-opening experience. The statistics at the start, the people at the end, all just came together to provide a service unlike anything the world has ever seen. You know, you're just taking these people from just treacherous, torturous conditions, and then literally, from their words, putting them in heaven. And in saying that, there are clearly so many negative aspects about this entire time period. You can look at so many different examples and you just go, oh really, I'm glad that we live in the modern day that we do. However, it is things like this, like the Underground Railroad, and look, I'm sure it had plenty of flaws, and it did have the system fighting against it, which just made it even harder, but it did just provide a little bit of positivity, a little bit of hope for so many people, and honestly, it just changed the world, I reckon. But anyway, in saying that, I reckon I'm going to call it there, so thank you for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to the YouTube algorithm things down below. Also, if this is the first video of mine that you are watching, then make sure to go check out any other ones I've done. Also, make sure to go check out the original video down in the description below, or hey, maybe even just want to consider subscribing so that you don't miss another one of these in the future. But all in all, have a good one, and see ya.